Chosen one, welcome, radiant ones, the rare kind who walk in rooms and shift the energy without saying a word. If you've ever been the topic of whispers, the center of a silent setup, or the reason somebody suddenly starts acting funny, congratulations, that's what happens when your presence threatens pretenders. You're not just different. You're divine proof that integrity doesn't need an audience to be real. Now let's talk about the wild twist. When people try to dig into your past expecting to find dust, and all they find is gold. They wanted scandal, but found structure. They came for chaos and left with clarity. That's what happens when your lifestyle matches your spirit. Not perfect, but intentional. You're the kind of person who doesn't just avoid drama, you disarm it. See, they thought you were easy to break down because you don't brag, you don't flex, you don't explain yourself to loud mouths. But what they didn't realize is that silence backed by consistency is louder than any rumor. And now, the same people sent to expose you are walking away impressed, telling stories of how solid you really are. So here's the truth. You are not under attack. You are under review and still passing every test. What's meant to destroy you is only confirming what your soul already knew, that you're protected, prepared, and positioned. This is not just a survival story, it's your ascension. They try to turn your name into a problem and end up turning it into praise. Let's get into how their investigation accidentally turned into your elevation. Because when your truth is this intact, even your enemies become your advertisement. Let's go. Looking for purpose and peace? Hit subscribe and start the journey. Some people aren't watching to understand you. They're watching and waiting, hoping to catch a stumble they can magnify into a scandal. It's not curiosity, it's calculation. There's a quiet hunt behind their smiles, an unspoken desire to prove that your calm is fake, your light is artificial, and your consistency is a cover. But what shakes them isn't what they find, it's what they don't. They expect a crack and instead run into stone. What unsettles them most is your alignment, not your defense. You don't scramble to clean up because you've already built clean. You don't panic when questioned because you've got nothing to hide. They send out whispers like fishing lines, hoping someone pulls back a flaw. And all they get are people speaking of your steadiness. That stings, because they're not ready for a story with no scandal. They need chaos to validate their doubt. But you live in a way that doesn't bend when the lights go out. That's what they never expect, a truth that doesn't shrink under scrutiny. So their plan backfires. The whispers they send out boomerang back with words they never wanted to hear. They've always moved with grace. You don't have to perform to clear your name. Your life already testifies. And that silent disappointment they feel, that's the collapse of a lie that never got a chance to live. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. They assume reputation is fragile, easily broken with a few well-placed rumors. What they forget is that you've been building something stronger than hearsay, a legacy of presence that echoes louder than any whisper. They toss out distortion, hoping it spreads fast enough to become fact. But when people start looking into the real you, not the version painted by assumptions, the narrative doesn't stick. The places where you've shown up fully, quietly, and consistently hold weight they didn't count on. Not everyone knows your full story, but enough people know your truth. And when asked, they don't parrot gossip. They speak from experience. That's not who I've seen. They've always been steady, never gave that energy. The problem isn't that someone defends you. It's that too many people simply don't believe the lie. The impact you leave behind in everyday moments speaks louder than any slander campaign ever could. And those trying to shape the story realize too late that they're not just up against your image, they're up against your integrity. That's when frustration sets in, not because they failed to twist the truth, but because the truth was too deeply rooted to be shaken. They counted on silence, but the reality spoke up, not to defend, but to correct. And nothing hits harder than quiet loyalty, refusing to fold under pressure. Sometimes the silence around your name says more than the noise others try to stir. There are those who wait, watching from the shadows, convinced that if they press hard enough, someone somewhere will expose you. But the trap they set collapses on its own, not because people rush to defend you, but because even those who aren't aligned with you still won't lie on your name. That's the power of walking steady. The ones who never got close, the ones who drifted with no drama, the ones who had no strong opinion at all. They don't feed the story. They shrug, nod, maybe say you were quiet or kept your space, but there's no scandal. No one adds fuel because there's nothing to burn. That's not luck, that's character in motion. When your life leaves no open door for slander to slip through, even indifference bends toward truth. And the ones orchestrating the whispers, they bank on bias, not realizing that neutrality often sides with integrity. They expected betrayal. They got balance. And that burns, not because anyone defends you out loud, but because even the passive voices won't validate the narrative they're desperate to sell. What they find isn't ammunition, it's absence. The absence of mess, of chaos, of contradiction. That kind of silence, it's louder than gossip could ever be. Feel God's love stirring within you. Don't let it stop there. Hit the super thank you button and sow a seed of $20 or more. That simple act can ignite hope, heal hearts, and carry His love further than you imagine. You were made to shine His light. This is your moment. Be the miracle someone's been praying for. Let heaven move through you. The very search meant to discredit ends up revealing something far more uncomfortable. Not about you, but about them. They expect to uncover a crack, and instead are handed a reflection. What they wanted to use as evidence turns into exposure. The more people share real accounts, calm, steady, grounded, the more the false image they built begins to distort. Their frustration doesn't stem from a failed attack. It comes from realizing the spotlight they tried to aim at your flaws only highlights their own lack of self-work. The more clarity they hear about your life, the more distorted their own choices feel, in contrast. It's not a failed report, it's a confrontation they never prepared for. Every word spoken about your steadiness makes their own instability echo louder. What unsettles them isn't your reputation, it's your consistency. Because when someone lives with alignment, they don't have to fix the narrative. They are the narrative. So now, instead of being vindicated, they're exposed. The lie has nowhere to land. The storm they summon ends with them standing alone, watching as the truth, not yours, but their own, rises around them. You didn't ask for a spotlight, but you became one. And in its glow, the shadows can no longer pretend. They rely on perception as a weapon, not action, not evidence, just whispers wrapped in confidence, delivered in rooms where no one stops to verify. They build illusions slowly, one slanted story at a time, convinced that if they can shape how you're viewed, they never need to confront who you truly are. Their goal isn't confrontation, it's containment. But stories have a strange way of unraveling when people start checking the facts instead of the tone. When the script reaches those outside the circle, it falters. Colleagues, neighbors, Even people with no personal investment step forward. And what they offer isn't fanfare, it's clarity. Unbiased, neutral voices speak not from loyalty, but observation. And what they say doesn't match the tale being told. That's when it all starts to break. Suddenly, the illusion is unsupported. What they try to sculpt in silence can't survive public light. The tone shifts. People begin to wonder why such effort was put into discrediting someone whose record shows no chaos. The narrative stops working, not because you speak louder, but because your life speaks for itself. Calm, grounded, and consistent. And that's the real loss. They don't just fail to change your image, they lose control of the narrative altogether. The mask they wore to guide perception slips, and what's left isn't you being exposed. It's them standing in the wreckage of a story that never held weight. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. What stands out isn't what you say, but how you move when no one's watching. That's where your reputation is carved. Not in quotes, not in clout, but in how your energy lands, even in passing. You don't chase validation or sculpt a performance to win favor. You're not flashy. You're not campaigning for character points. You're just real. In the quiet, in the small moments, in the way you show respect without demand. That steady alignment becomes your signature, even to people who don't know your full history. A receptionist, a neighbor, someone you only interacted with once. They can't tell your life story, but they remember the tone you carried. And when asked, they don't hesitate. That one? No drama, solid presence. That's what they weren't prepared for. They assumed your reputation was fragile, one wrong voice away from ruin. But what they encounter instead is a chain of quiet confirmations that all lead back to integrity. No scandal, no inconsistencies, just story after story that doesn't match the script. That's what sets panic in motion. Because how do you take down someone whose life doesn't contradict itself? Not everyone loves you, but even your distance feels clean. That's not a mask, that's maintenance, the inner kind. And when it counts, even strangers speak your name with a quiet respect. That's not charm, that's truth with roots. While they rehearse their takedown, you're out here living it. And that's a legacy no smear campaign can rewrite. They misunderstand your stillness as absence, your silence as retreat. They watch from a distance and assume distance means defeat. That because you don't orbit every social circle or join every performance, you're irrelevant. But that's solitude they side-eye. It turns out to be your sanctuary. While others entangle themselves in tangled alliances and emotional contracts built on ego and flattery, you remain untangled. That choice, to sit out of the noise, becomes your advantage. You didn't lock yourself out. You kept the chaos from walking in. And now that consequences start knocking, your isolation isn't loneliness, it's protection. You don't scramble when names get dragged because yours was never in the dirt to begin with. They hoped your silence would discredit you. Instead, it distances you from every lie they try to throw. You're not uninvolved because you're excluded. You're untouched because you're wise. You chose a path without footprints because you didn't need to follow trends to remain rooted. When the narratives shift and fingers start pointing, they realize you're the only one not in the mess. The very thing they mocked becomes the shield they didn't see coming. What looked like detachment is now seen as discernment. What they called cold is now understood as clarity. While they panicked in the middle of their own drama, you stood anchored in the one place they couldn't reach: peace. Feel God's love stirring within you. Don't let it stop there. Hit the super thank you button and sow a seed of $20 or more. That simple act can ignite hope, heal hearts, and carry His love further than you imagine. You are made to shine His light. This is your moment. Be the miracle someone's been praying for. Let heaven move through you. Your choices echo louder than any defense you could ever speak. While some spend energy shaping an image, your truth has been quietly building its own testimony. Every unbroadcasted moment of kindness, every private choice to stay grounded instead of reacting, every unseen act of grace has left its mark. Not for recognition, but as quiet evidence. You've never had to announce your integrity. It simply lingered in the room after you left. And when people ask about you, they don't get silence or shade. They get respect from those who have no reason to offer it but truth. The very places others thought they could turn against you instead speak in your favor. That unsettles those who've been scripting your downfall. They planned for confusion, but what they face is clarity. You don't have to defend your name when your life already speaks fluently. And the wildest part, it's not about being liked, it's about being consistent. That kind of reputation isn't curated, it's earned by being solid when no one's clapping, by holding character when no one's watching. So now, when attempts at sabotage arise, they collapse under the weight of the credibility you've already sown. People speak well not because you're perfect, but because your presence has never rung false. In the moments that matter, your track record does the talking, and every quiet seed of character you've planted becomes your protection. They misread your calm as dullness, your privacy as irrelevance. Because you're not loud or erratic, because you don't entertain chaos, they label you forgettable. But what unsettles them isn't your silence, it's the strength hiding in it. While they spiral in theatrics, you master self-control. While they chase reactions, you build discipline. And when the moment comes to expose some weakness, some impulsive mistake they can use against you, they're left empty-handed. Your restraint becomes their frustration. You don't leave trails of mess. You don't burn bridges, start fires, or leave anything undone. What they hoped would discredit you only ends up highlighting how unshakable your foundation is. Your life may look uneventful to those who need noise to feel valid, but that same stillness becomes your strongest defense. You're not boring, you're strategic. You don't take reckless steps because you're walking in direction, not reaction. And now, when the dust settles, the one who kept it quiet becomes the one no one can touch. You weren't avoiding attention. You were preserving your legacy. And the very thing they used to mock becomes the thing that silences them. They crafted schemes, but you were too grounded to give them access. They waited for your downfall, but your structure had no cracks. You didn't just dodge the attack, you were never vulnerable to it. They don't investigate to find clarity. They search to validate their assumptions. What they want isn't truth, it's backup for their bitterness. They set the stage expecting to see you fall, convinced the pieces will confirm the image they've already decided to believe. But when the lens turns toward reality, what it reveals isn't destruction, it's alignment. The people they counted on to twist the story don't bend it at all. In fact, they deliver nothing but balance and honesty. No fabricated scandals, no dramatic betrayals, just calm accounts of composure, boundaries, and grace under pressure. Suddenly, the plan doesn't just fail, it exposes itself. What was meant to be your breaking point becomes your proof of strength. The one thing they never imagined was that your truth would stand unshaken under scrutiny. And as the facts line up, what's left in the open isn't your flaw, it's their motive. The light doesn't just protect you, it puts them on full display. Their intentions are caught under the very spotlight they tried to shine on your name. And now, instead of a victory, they're standing in the aftermath of their own manipulation. This wasn't just a loss for their lie, it was a revelation. You didn't just walk away clean, you walked away confirmed. They misread your quiet presence as weakness, your restraint as irrelevance. To them, visibility is value, and noise equals influence. So when you stay steady and unbothered, they assume there's no substance behind it. But they don't see what holds you up, only what's on display. What unnerves them isn't your silence. It's what's holding that silence in place. Earned respect. Not the shallow kind built on flattery or trend, but the slow-grown kind, forged through how you treat people when no one's watching. While they hope a few conversations can tarnish your name, they're met with hesitation. Not everyone loves you, but even the indifferent refuse to fake a lie. That's when their plans start to crack. People may not always speak in your favor, but they know better than to speak against what they've seen hold true. You don't have a fan club, you have credibility. Even those who never got close know better than to question what's been proven over time. Your consistency, your control, your refusal to sink into mess. They try to poke holes in your image, but realize they're standing in a circle where integrity shields you from all sides. They weren't counting on the invisible safeguards, the way your actions left lasting impressions without needing applause. Your name doesn't fly around for attention, but it carries weight where it matters. They thought the right pressure would turn others against you, but what it turns up instead is reluctance. Not everyone vouches for you, but many quietly refuse to help destroy you. They expected allies, but all they found was indifference that doesn't play into manipulation. That's not luck. That's reputation built brick by brick. You weren't networking, you were planting. And now that someone's trying to dig up dirt, they find themselves surrounded by soil that won't shift. It's not because you're perfect, it's because you've been deliberate. And when everything else gets shaken, people remember who stood calm, didn't feed conflict, didn't bend under pressure. You're not upheld by applause, you're upheld by memory, and even unspoken respect becomes a wall no lie can climb. They assume they can uncover some hidden flaw by gathering opinions. They expect that with enough questions and enough whispers, someone will finally say something that sticks. What they don't realize is they're not just surveying. They're building a case. And you've already filed the evidence. Every time you chose restraint over retaliation, every decision to stay composed under pressure, every boundary held without explanation. All of it stands as quiet testimony. You didn't curate a perfect image, you just lived with intention. And now that they try to spin a story, they walk straight into a body of work that doesn't bend to their agenda. They search for inconsistencies and instead find patterns: consistency, maturity, calm. Your life holds its own record, and it doesn't waver under inspection. Feel God's love stirring within you. Don't let it stop there. Hit the super thank you button and sow a seed of $20 or more. That simple act can ignite hope, heal hearts, and carry His love further than you imagine. You were made to shine His light. This is your moment. Be the miracle someone's been praying for. Let heaven move through you. They thought silence meant emptiness, but your silence has been full of decisions that built a track record they can't rewrite. They thought they were starting a rumor mill, but they set off a truth check. And that truth isn't coming from loyalty or strategy. It's coming from observation. People who cross paths with you aren't guessing your intentions. They're recalling what they've seen. They're not defending you, they're just being honest. That's what disarms everything. This isn't about opinions, it's about evidence. They expected to find scandal. Instead, they run into history, one shaped by clarity, steadiness, and grace. The spotlight they thought would reveal a mess ends up highlighting your discipline. You don't need to clarify or defend. Your life already speaks for you, and it speaks clearly. Not in dramatic gestures, but in the accumulation of everyday integrity. While they chase confusion, you remain undisturbed, because every step you took with care has already answered every question they didn't know they'd ask. Make your impact eternal. Join now and be a light in someone's darkness. They depend on you staying quiet, so their version of the story goes unchallenged. They assume your silence is surrender, that your refusal to engage means they've won. But what unsettles them most is that you don't react, not because you can't, but because you've already won in the one arena that matters: self-control. You were never absent, you were observing. They confuse your stillness with weakness, unaware that still waters don't signal lack of depth, but unshakable power. And when truth starts surfacing through voices they didn't prepare for, panic sets in. Not because you exposed them, but because others did, without your prompting, without your input. That's when the unraveling begins. Their entire strategy leans on you breaking character, on you snapping loud enough to shift attention. But you don't give them the spectacle they crave. You don't interrupt the narrative. You let it collapse under its own weight. They build illusions that rely on your absence from the conversation. But when others begin sharing what they've seen of your consistency, your patience, your refusal to trade dignity for drama, their script stops making sense. People start asking questions. The version of you they tried to sell no longer aligns with the reality others remember. Now they're not just telling lies, they're chasing them, trying to rewrite what's already been disproven. They start rewriting timelines, spinning excuses, stumbling over contradictions in spaces they assumed no one was listening. But you never lift your voice. You don't need to. The strength of your character presses down heavier than any response could. You never needed to fight the lie. You simply outlived it. What once looked like silence is now recognized as strategy. What once was mocked as passivity is now seen as mastery. The truth didn't arrive with fireworks. It walked in with memory. And now, as the dust settles, they are left exposed not by confrontation, but by your refusal to be moved. That's not just power, that's poetic justice.